This is Rummy's Corner. So as all of you watching this already know, Marvelous Marvin Hagler recently passed away. Now normally I'm not the type of person who gets too bent out of shape following a celebrity death, but for me personally, this is one of those rare exceptions. This one hits home for me. Marvelous Marvin Hagler was my first childhood boxing hero, and while I'm not entirely sure what it is that I want to say about Hagler, I know I want to say something. So I guess I'll start by explaining how I first became a Hagler fan as a 9-year-old. But for me, my introduction to boxing actually happened sometime a few months earlier when I was still 8. What first got me interested in boxing was actually the Rocky franchise, starring Sylvester Stallone as the Italian stallion Rocky Balboa. And it wasn't even the original 1976 classic. It was Rocky III that first grabbed my attention. As a kid, I thought Rocky III was a cinematic masterpiece. And all of these years later, I'm every bit as fond of that movie now as I was back then. The story was fun and simple, and it was an action-packed movie. I remember being absolutely mesmerized by the boxing sequences. As a kid, I didn't know any better, but I had just assumed this was pretty normal action one could expect from a boxing match. I can't tell you how many times I watched that movie, often with my old man. So my interest in boxing began growing, and I remember asking my father, "Who's the heavyweight champion now?" My father told me that the real heavyweight champion at that time was this guy who went by the nickname the Easton Assassin, Larry Holmes. Now, I had no idea who this Larry Holmes fellow was at that time, but I was immediately interested in seeing him fight. Now, this was around the time that I first started becoming interested in professional sports. Donnie Baseball was my first childhood hero, and I am a lifelong Yankees fan like my father before me. Basketball was my favorite sport back then, and I was a big-time fan of Dr. J, Julius Erving. I was also a huge Joe Montana fan, but these were all team sports. And even back then, there was something about one-on-one battle that intrigued me. So I was very eager to check out some boxing, all because of Rocky III. So I remember I was talking about Larry Holmes with my father, and I was convinced that if this guy was the heavyweight champion, he must be the greatest boxer in the world. But my dad was very quick to correct me. "Whoa, what do you mean there's a better boxer than the heavyweight champion, Dad? How can that be?" My father explained to me the pound-for-pound concept. It was then that I first heard my father say the name, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Wow, even the name was badass. Marvelous Marvin Hagler. So my father explained to me that Hagler was the best boxer in the world at that time. Full disclosure, by this point in his life, it's probably more accurate to say that my dad was a Hagler fan far more so than a boxing fan. Later in life, my father told stories about how when he was a young kid, my grandfather would let him stay up late on Friday nights to watch the Gillette boxing matches. So he started watching boxing in the mid-50s, and he was a pretty big fan throughout the 60s and 70s. But by the mid-80s, he stopped following as closely. But he always tuned in when he knew Hagler was fighting. As fate would have it, Hagler had a fight coming up. The date was April 15th, 1985. All I knew was that Hagler was scheduled to defend his championship against a lethal puncher known as Tommy the Hitman Hearns. And I couldn't wait to watch it. So yeah, going into this fight, I was biased, and I became a de facto Hagler fan before I had even seen him fight. I was following my old man's footsteps in boxing just like I did with baseball. I guess my rebellious phase with basketball and football had passed. I wanted to watch Hagler win, and without any other point of reference, I was fully expecting a ridiculous crazy slugfest like something out of Rocky III. Even the stare down lived up to that expectation, and I was a little scared for Marvin. The hitman looked every bit as intimidating as Clubber Lang. Then the explosive start had me nothing short of fascinated. I remember a certain enthusiasm in my father that was usually only reserved for key moments when watching team sports. The commentators were enthusiastic too. It was captivating, edge-of-your-seat excitement as these two boxers were instantly engaged in a war. It was simply incredible, and at one point during that crazy dramatic opening round, I remember my old man roaring with laughter at the absurdity of the action, which my old man had a contagious laugh, so I started giggling along with him like an idiot. You knew it was something special. My eyes were glued to the TV for the first 2 rounds. It was just like I thought, every bit as dramatic and intense as the realistic boxing portrayal in Rocky III. Except it was even better, and it was real, and it provided so much raw excitement. Then I remember the great sense of panic that overcame me when the action was halted so that the ring physician could examine Hagler's cut. My old man's entire demeanor had changed, and he explained how they could maybe stop the fight because of the cut. No way! My heart sank. But crisis averted, the fight resumed, and the next thing I remember was Hagler appeared to hurt Tommy, and I'll never forget the mental image of Tommy smiling. That big smile, almost taunting Hagler, before the Marvelous One landed the crushing finishing blow. The fight was over. And I remember cheering with my old man, and from that point forward, I considered myself a true boxing fan. And the fight produced the type of drama and action that was like something out of Rocky III, except it was even more exciting and more compelling. We taped that epic fight on a crummy VHS tape that probably had a dozen other things recorded to it previously. But I had the fight, and that VHS tape allowed me to watch it anytime I wanted. Of course, I'd quickly learn over the years that the first boxing match I remember seeing was the exception to the rule. They weren't all like something out of a Rocky movie, but I was still hooked on boxing, and damn, what a truly amazing fight between Hagler and Hearns. In the nearly 36 years since then, I've seen the fight many times, but it had been a few years since I last watched it, until very recently when I did my last video, the top 50 must-watch boxing fights. For anyone who saw that, even though I had nothing to do with the outcome of the results, you might have noticed the very first clip I showed was the Hagler-Hearns stare down, and the very last clip I showed was Marvin celebrating his victory against the Hitman. The video was bookmarked with clips from that fight as sort of my personal tribute to the fight that made me a boxing fan. But little did I know at that time that before I even finished my next video, the Marvelous One had sadly passed away. Hagler provided me with a magical childhood memory that will always hold a special place in my heart for as long as I live. And I know I'm not alone. Granted, I became a Hagler fan at the tail end of his career, and on that note, the Mugabe fight was another amazing effort from Marvin, and my inner 9-year-old still strenuously objects to the verdict in the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, and the fact that Ray didn't give Hagler a rematch. But that experience of seeing the Hagler-Hearns fight was something I will always hold dear and never forget. And now that it's going on 10 years since my father unexpectedly passed away, Hagler's death has hit me harder than any boxing death, with the lone exception of Emanuel Stewart. But in the case of Emanuel, I was fortunate to have developed a friendship with him over the last few years of his life, and I still miss Emanuel dearly to this day. But in the case of Marvin, I never had the privilege of knowing the man. I was merely a fan, and yet I am still very deeply saddened by his passing. Because knowing that my childhood hero, a complete and total badass like Marvelous Marvin Hagler, knowing that he is down for a permanent 10 count is simply heartbreaking. It acts as a sad reminder of the fact that we're all racing towards the same finish line. But while Marvin has passed on and is no longer with us, rest assured his boxing legacy is immortal. His legacy will live on forever, and the wonderful memories he provided for so many fans will long be cherished. His efforts inside the ring, his warrior spirit and iron will, he was an inspirational figure to me. a true sporting hero who earned his fame and status the hard way. My sincere condolences to Hagler's surviving family and friends. Rest in peace, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and thank you for the magical memories. Like I mentioned, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to say here, but I wanted to say something for the tremendous human being and incredible athlete who made me a boxing fan. And for what it's worth, I'm going to try and do a more thorough examination of Hagler's career in the fairly near future after I release my current work in progress. So I'm hoping to have a more in-depth Hagler video out sometime in the next few weeks. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed and have a wonderful night. This is Rummy's Corner.